U.S. government. This information that I had gathered also, well, let me say it in a different way. Over a period of time, traveling all over the world and having the ability to speak 5 languages, I read newspapers from Northern Europe, and also from Spain and from Latin America. And I realized that the U.S. was not the bastion of freedom that we had grown to believe it was. I learned that many of the devious things that the Soviet Union did, we also did. And it was common knowledge in 1979 in Europe that the U.S. military-industrial complex was unnecessary, that the Russians would fall apart, literally would implode, if they were left alone. That this Reagan and Carter election was a sham on the American people on Reagan's part, because the military-industrial complex didn't need to be built up. The Russian people didn't believe in the system. They didn't have enough to eat. They didn't believe Pravda. And again, it was common knowledge in Northern Europe that within 10 years the Russian system would fail. Over a period of time, I began to question what I was doing, and I wanted out. My Swedish girlfriend convinced me to stop working for the DEA and the CIA, to take up Swedish citizenship, and to completely cease and desist from all U.S. activity and never come back into the U.S. again. I went to my CIA contacts in Panama and explained to them that I wanted out. They protested and told me that I couldn't get out, that I knew too much, that I was too valuable, that I'd made too many connections all over the Americas. And when I insisted, they finally gave in. What's interesting is approximately 3 weeks later, I learned from the Aspen police, who were my friends, that there were people on my land with high-powered rifles that didn't appear to be hunters, and that they were watching my house. I figured there was a hit out on me, so I left. I flew to Houston in one of my private airplanes. I went to my ex-wife's house and told her that I was going to be leaving the country and moving to Sweden, and I said goodbye to my daughter. When I stepped out of the house and walked down the street, I was surrounded by plainclothes people driving Pontiac Firebirds and Chevrolet Camaros, and I didn't know who they were, so I started running. They chased me. A helicopter came after me. I eventually ran in an abandoned building that was under construction, and while I could see the helicopter lights on one end of the building, I ran out the other building and ran through a bayou and a field and escaped these people. I heard them say, "Don't shoot him in the back." Okay. Later that night, some people came to my ex-wife's house and told her that they were DEA agents and that they had an arrest warrant for me. She allowed them to search the house and the garage, and they left. Then sometime later, my parents reported to me that Agent Richard Brazil out of San Antonio had come by the house and wanted to know where I was. My parents told him they didn't know. A week later, I contacted Ken Wincorn, an attorney in Dallas. He called the DEA 3 times within a week and offered to surrender me. They maintained that they did not want me. He called the DPS. They did not want me. So it was clear to me that whoever wanted me was going to kill me. So I continued to run. Eventually, through some of my contacts in Bolivia that worked also for the CIA, it was learned that I was in Cancun, Mexico. I was accosted, beaten, wrapped in chains by thugs that the U.S. government hired. I was brought back to the United States on an airplane in chains. I think that's called kidnapping. But the U.S. maintains that it's okay. We can go around the world, kidnap anybody, and do any illegal thing we want to. I told the Mexican authorities I wanted to go to Panama or Sweden. They said, you don't have any choice. The DEA is going to take you back, and that's it. In a pretrial hearing, Agent Richard Brazil admitted on the stand under oath that he had purposely kept all of the information out of the DEA computer because he knew that I had very high-level connections in the DEA, and that he was afraid that I would learn about the case against me. Eventually, I learned that other DEA officials had also been arrested, and that other CIA contacts that I had flown drugs and arms with and money had been murdered. While I was awaiting trial in San Antonio, the prison chaplain by the name of Crook, it's an interesting name for a prison chaplain, but he was a nice enough fellow. He came to me and told me that I had to go to the chapel, that he had some bad news. I was informed that my Swedish wife, the mother of my child, had been found on a railroad track in Germany, that she had committed suicide. I didn't believe it for a minute, but that was what he told me. Then a week later, I was informed that Cesar Rodriguez, my friend and Noriega's friend, had been found in Colombia with his throat cut. This is a symbol called a Colombian necktie. It means you talked. Now remember, my Swedish wife had compiled the information about Noriega and the CIA in a safety deposit box in Berlin, Germany. I realized very quickly that if I went to trial, I'd probably either end up dead or I had no supporting evidence. So when I did finally go in front of Judge Fred Shannon in San Antonio, I was asked if I was guilty, and I told him yes, I was guilty of smuggling cocaine from Panama and through Belize and through Nicaragua. And then he asked if I was pleading guilty for any other reason. Was there a deal made? Was there a promise? Were there any threats? And I said, well, I don't think there's any deals, and there's probably no promises other than I'm not supposed to get more than 15 years. But actually, I do not want to go to trial and embarrass the U.S. government and the DEA and the CIA because I'm afraid I'll end up dead like my former colleague, Sante Barrio, who was murdered with a poisoned peanut butter sandwich in the Bexar County Jail. Nothing was done about it, and I'm afraid that the same fate would fall on me if I tried to embarrass the U.S. government by explaining what I was doing while working for the government. The judge was quite shocked and asked my attorney, one of my attorneys, Tex McConaughey, to prove that I was working for the government. He presented my logbook, my official logbook, showing that I had been flying around the U.S. and the world in numerous DEA-registered aircraft, and that I'd been trained by DEA to make soft and short field landings in DEA aircraft. Judge Shannon accepted this as fact. Then he said, okay, you're guilty, and that's it. The end of the guilty plea hearing. Well, according to the law, this didn't satisfy something called a factual basis for the crime.